Welcome to the Dental Journeys podcast, proudly sponsored by White Coat Financial. Join us as we explore the journeys, strategies, and successes of dental professionals across Canada. Whether you're a brand new grad or a seasoned dentist, our episodes aim to provide advice and insights for your journey in the dynamic world of dentistry. On today's episode, we welcome Dr. Bruce Freeman. Dr. Freeman is an honors graduate from the University of Toronto. He then completed the Advanced Education in General Dentistry program at the Eastman Dental Center in Rochester. He then returned to the University of Toronto to complete his diploma in orthodontics and his Master's of Science degree in temporomandibular disorders and orofacial pain. To fast forward to today, Dr. Freeman is an international lecturer on clinical orthodontics, facial pain, patient experience, and virtual surgical planning. He's also the co-director of the facial pain unit at Mount Sinai Hospital. I could take an hour to read off Dr. Freeman's resume and accolades, and I'll probably still miss a bunch of them. But what I want to say about Dr. Freeman that doesn't fit on a resume is that he impacts just about everyone he ever comes into contact with for the better. I know countless dentists who look up to Dr. Freeman, and for good reason. He's never shy about telling it like it is or telling you what you need to hear versus what you want to hear. He's someone you could go to for career advice, life advice, and even if you just need someone to talk to. Now, he might tell you how you're being not so smart, but he always follows it up with kindness because he genuinely cares. He's someone I'm proud to call a mentor, and I can't say enough good things about Dr. Freeman. So without further ado, let's get into today's episode. What got you started in your profession? Because I know you've spoken to it that most people sort of had these three silos they went into, but you had a moment when you were, I think it was high school, if you correct me if I'm wrong, where you saw this change that someone had by going to see a dentist.
It was, am I allowed to swear on this podcast or how's
that work? by all means, if you need to, if you want to, go ahead.
It happens. So I just, so you know, no, like, as I said to you, back in the day, it was what are you going to do in your life? I'll become a doctor, a dentist, or a lawyer. And you're like, do I have any other options? And at the time, there weren't really, nobody said I'm going to become an influencer. Nobody said I'm going to be a fintech expert because none of these things existed. So there was a young lady who people made fun of her, and because of her, she had a massive underbite. And having jaw surgery back then was nobody was doing that sort of thing. It was sort of a new thing. Very rarely done, and she got braces, and it changed who she was. And I thought, wow, like, she became a different person, really. And I thought, well, that was very interesting. So, no matter what you do, you're of in service to someone or something. You know what I mean? Like, it's not like, oh, I don't want to deal with people, or I don't. Well, no matter what you do, you're producing something, or somebody's on the other end of what you're doing. So whether it's one person or 10 people, do you know what I mean? So we're all in service, maybe in a direct or indirect way. So for me, I also didn't think I was smart enough to become a doctor. I was just like, oh no, medicine scares me. I don't want to kill anybody. I don't want to be responsible for killing somebody. Like, holy God, I don't want to do that. And meanwhile, today, dealing with facial pain, and now I work in the neurosurgery department with one of the top neurosurgeons in the world. I'm like, how did I get here? Why? This is not what I expected. I might as well just gone to med school. So, it's been a bit of a circuitous path, and I didn't predict any of it, and I don't think you can predict. I think part of the problem is everybody now tries to pre-engineer their lives. They try to whiteboard it. They try to vision board it. And you know what? That's the surefire way to get disappointed.
I was going to say, joke's on you. Yeah, I thought I'm going to have less responsibility.
Yeah.
There you are dealing with.
I know. Now I'm like, how did this happen? Yeah,
seriously. A quarter of a millimeter left or right, and person's nerve goes out. And
luckily, nobody's asking me to do surgery. I'm just consulting. Thankfully, I don't not going near anybody's brain. That's for sure. But having the respect and seeing what these people are going through, both from the patient side and the practitioner side, is pretty fascinating.
Yeah, and I did think it was interesting because you didn't plan things out to a T. And I'll be honest, most of the doctors that I work with, they're exactly what you said. From high school, they knew exactly what courses to take to boost their GPA, and then what clubs they have to be a part of to get into the university of their choice. And then from there, everything was mapped out to a T. And there is this huge expectational gap of what they want to do and what actually might happen in their life. Why do you think it was that you weren't like that? You seemed to be very free flowing. Even when you decided to go to school, it was like, I'll just do another program, or I want to go back to school. What was
Well,
that?
part of it, the internet's the death knell of everything, to be honest, because back in the day, you just didn't know. You just said, I'm going to apply to dental school. Where did I apply? U of T. Why? I didn't even know there were other schools. Like, I had no clue. I saw I went online and went, oh, dental schools in Canada. Like, I guess I knew there were other schools, obviously, but I just didn't even think like, oh, I could go there or I could apply to them or anything like that. So I think the problem is now everybody's so inundated with information, misinformation, saying you have to plan, you have to do this, you have to do this. This is how you do it. That's how you do it. And then, like I said, people lose who they are and they don't even know whose voice is coming out of their mouths. So I think when you take more chances and you just say, okay, yeah, there's a structure. I have to take certain prerequisites. There are certain things I have to do. That's great. Look that up and say, oh, I need this, and this. Okay, I have to fill out this form. Okay, that's great. But when you start micro engineering and trying to reverse engineer and change who you are, how you speak, that's where you just get so distilled or in the process you become nothing. You're not who you are. And I think that's part of the problem. And then you're always looking at this checklist. Am I following the list? Am I doing this? Am I doing this? And then you've lost sight. In yoga training, they always say, one of my instructors said, and she writes on yoga philosophy, you don't own the result. You can have an eye of the goal and say, well, this is what I want to achieve. But if all you do is focus on that goal, you lose sight of the steps. And those are the steps where either you make a mistake or you miss an opportunity. And you wonder in the end why nothing worked out. And you don't even remember how you got there. And how often have you driven? How often do people drive somewhere or go somewhere and they get there and they're going, how the hell did I get here? That mind-body disconnect. So when you're so focused on an end result, you're missing the view, you're missing the people you're meeting, you're just plowing through life, and that's where you miss opportunities. The best thing, when people travel, they go, where should I eat? Where should I eat? And I said, go on 24 hours in Florence, 24 hours in Paris. Follow where they tell you to go, and then don't go there. Go to every spot in between. At least it gives you sort of a framework. But when you try, and dentists do this all the time, they take courses, my work is failing or this isn't working. And they go to these fancy courses that are tens of thousands, sometimes hundreds of thousands of dollars. And then they follow it to a T. And then guess what? It's not going to work. You got to cherry pick what works for you. And Danielle Offrey, last name Ofri, she writes one of what I consider a Bible, What Patients Say, What Doctors Hear. And it's interesting because she says, she reads something, she goes on Monday morning, she sees a patient, she says, you should do it like this. And the patient looks at her like, are you an idiot? And then she's like, scratch that one off the list, because coming out of her mouth, it just didn't work.
Yeah.
And if people try to say what I say to their patients the way I say it, it's not going to work any more than me doing the same, doing the opposite of whatever they're doing. Do you know what I mean? So it's this lack of awareness of yourself. And one of the things of the med students that I coach is they have to write these reflections. Every time you see a patient, they have to go back and write a reflection saying, what did I say? How did they react? What could I have done better? Where did it go sideways? When did the patient start to cry, or when did I lose their trust? And if you don't do those reflections, and you could do that in the business world, let's say you're meeting a client and they're not buying what you're selling, so to speak. And then you're like, oh, well, it's all their fault. That's everybody's thing. When I was in school, if I came home and I said, there was a problem at school and the teacher got mad, and my first thing my parents would say to me, what did you do wrong? Not marching to the school and saying, my son never does anything wrong. Well, just the opposite. They would fight with the teacher and go, no. I'm sure it was his fault. So I think you can't blame everybody else. Sometimes you got to look in the mirror and realize you're the problem.
There's a really good book that I like. I'm sure you've heard of it or maybe even read it. It sounds like it. Extreme Ownership by Jocko Willink. Love the book, but he talks a lot about just taking complete ownership of your life, the good, the bad, even some of the random stuff that happens. if you take ownership of it, it just makes your life so much easier to control. The wins are yours, the losses are also yours. There's nothing really out of your control. And
You
what you're
know,
saying is exactly that.
Viktor Frankl, the famous Holocaust survivor, doctor, philosopher, neurologist, psychiatrist. I don't know what he didn't do. And he said the one thing you can always control is how you behave. You can't control the world around you, pandemic, everything else. But,
Mhm.
and I just read something recently that says, well, I grew up in this bad environment, or my parents did this, my parents did that. That's okay. But who's perpetuating it?
Mhm.
We perpetuate our own problems. And that doesn't, and believe me, that doesn't mean that we don't need help or things are sometimes just so beyond our control. But in general, we're talking general terms. We're not talking extreme circumstances that, yeah, we're the architects of our own success and failure.
Yeah. And I think I really like what you said about, or I guess what your yoga instructor said, where you don't own the results, only your actions and I guess the inputs that you put into it. And I'm not a religious person, but it's very much like that saying, if you want to make God laugh, tell him your plans. And you didn't really do that. You just kind of went with the flow of things. You just did whatever you wanted to do necessarily. Um,
Well, I
is
didn't know
that
any
yeah,
better.
and I think I was gonna get to that. You didn't
Yeah.
have this information overload. Do you think that was honestly just a blessing in disguise? Because nowadays you get this paralysis of analysis with too many options and
Well,
too many different roads you can go down.
you had mentioned, my father. My father was in the British Army in World War II. And every day, the minute he turned 18, he ran to the mailbox. Did they call me up? Now, if you said that to someone today, they'd be running in the opposite direction before they'd want to sign up. But back then, it wasn't like he was Googling, how bad is war?
Yeah.
So he just knew he wanted to defend his country, and defend the freedoms that his country represented. So he didn't know any better. And sometimes not knowing is better because, like you said, you overanalyze, and then you realize, uh-oh. And like one of the things that you mentioned, sorry, in what you wrote is about time and about learning and about just spitballing things. And one of my former patients, who I still keep in touch with, she's a translator. She speaks a million languages, and she's older than me. And she says, I just fear I'm running out of time. I'm running out of runway. There's so much I need to learn. And when you see her face and that thirst for that knowledge, you're like, she's not sitting back and just waiting. One of my old gyms I went to, there was a guy my age, and we were lifting pretty heavy stuff. And I said, isn't it interesting? Like at our age, we're still doing this. And he goes, yeah. He goes, when my parents were our age, they were sitting in front of the fireplace waiting to die. you know, Essentially here we are, trying to deadlift, huge amounts of weight. And I'm thinking, what the heck am I doing? And I think, hey, if I can do it, why not?
Yeah, 100%. I do want to come back to your dad and another thing you said about just your translator, but I wanted to talk also about maybe the early stages of your career. Because when we met in person, you told me some crazy stories about when you first were an associate and the good experiences and the bad. And I think it's really nice to hear your perspective on how those shaped you as a dentist today. Um, was your obsession with patient experience, did it start from that time of seeing what you didn't want to do, or maybe examples of what you did want to actually implement? Could you walk me through a little bit about what those early days of your career were like?
Again, had no reference point. You know what I mean? Had no idea what I was doing. And yeah, I worked for one guy, brilliant guy, but you know, let's just say, interpersonal communication rate and, relationships was not his forte. That's not a slight against him. It's just, probably could have benefited from a little coaching, as we all could, or a little therapy, as we all could. And I think what happened was, in the moment, you don't realize. And the thing is that you learn more from a bad office than you do from a good office. You learn more if everything goes like they say in dental school. You hope everything breaks, falls apart, doesn't fit, because then when you get out in the real world, you're like, oh yeah, that's no problem. I've had this experience before. So I think you learn more from a bad situation, but a lot of it is we don't reflect, we don't look back, we don't think, why did that not work? And again, the blame game comes into play, and we spend more time blaming who was at fault than trying to fix the problem and understand why something didn't work. in terms of communication, there's a lawyer friend of mine who says healthcare without communication is veterinary science, because, it's hard to talk to the animals. So I think in terms of patient experience, the tail was wagging the dog, so to speak. I had no control over what was going on. I had no control over the narrative. I was too overly afraid of confrontation. I was overly afraid of doing the wrong thing and upsetting somebody. And I had no boundaries. So after ulcer number 1, I thought maybe I have a problem. After ulcer number 2, I realized no, 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 I really have a problem. As you feel something, an animal trying to crawl out of your stomach. So when I recognized that, I realized I got to make a change, and I wasn't happy. Every practitioner, no matter how nice they are, and everybody in every career, after a certain amount of time, you enter the angry part of your career, where, for most dentists, if I have to tell someone how to brush their teeth one more time and they don't, or, if someone comes to me with bleeding gums one more time, blames me for, you know what I mean? They start to get like, I cannot hear myself say this another time. So I think it's looking back and realizing what suddenly stopping and going, things are not working. Mm. And it's ripping off that Band-Aid and admitting things are not working. And that's when I started to read. That's when I went to yoga training, and I completely changed how I talk to patients. And that's where, the light bulb sort of clicked on, and I realized I tapped into something.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because the way you talk about some of the treatments that you discuss with patients and how you greet them and all that, it's amazing. I definitely want to talk about that. But I really love hearing perspectives in hindsight. And now that obviously you're no longer an associate, looking back to, younger Bruce, when he first started in his career, what would you say you're thankful to him for? And what would you say that he could have done a little bit better?
I'm thankful to him that he stayed the course and didn't give up, and that even, during the times where I had like a couple bad associateships and I didn't know what I was going to do, and then, you get into practice and then someone stops referring to you and all these little knocks, and I persevered. So that, that I'm thankful for. What smack him in the face for is taking everything too seriously, taking it to heart, like over beating myself up, and that perfectionist tendency. And it really is true. Perfectionism is the enemy of progress, I think is the quote. And that's 100% true, because you just get so lost in beating yourself up. You're not moving forward. You're just self-flagellating and going, you're terrible, and a lot of that, one of my patients, mums, I treated these 2 young ladies. Their mom's a psychologist, Donna Jacobs, and you can Google her. She has a great book. And it's a compilation of all the types of people that she's seen. Obviously, just she makes a composite based on experience with patients. So it's not one person; it's just little tidbits, to make a story. And we parent ourselves the way we are parented is what she writes about. And some people criticize themselves, and then they catastrophize. Driving up to the cottage, you run out of gas. You're an idiot. You never check the gas gauge. You're going to get murdered. Okay, that like, whoa. Like we went from you're an idiot because you didn't check the gas gauge to murder at 2 p.m. Instead of saying, I'm going to quiet those voices. And it's not about blaming your parent. It's just about recognizing when the going gets tough and you pull the emergency lever, how do you respond? Yeah. And I realized I blew up too many times. I beat myself up. That leads to anger. And we'll talk a little bit about that shortly. Mm-hmm. There's a point I made when reading the information that you sent, which was amazing, about why we do that and why we sometimes don't take chances. So there's a little bit, that's part of it. So if I could go back, I would say take more chances, fall on your face more. It's not you the problem. You know what I mean? It's not, every time something goes wrong, it's not about you as a person. It's just, we always have to take our ego out of the way. There's a great book by Ryan Holiday. I think it's Holiday or Holiday. The ego is the enemy. It says like, don't even read the book. Just read the title. Yeah. Ego is the enemy.
I used to think ego is a tool that is double-edged, that you can wield it in your favor, but it can also be detrimental. And as I get older, I'm realizing it's mostly just detrimental. Yeah, in a lot of ways. I used to think it would, maybe prevent you from taking on quote unquote lesser opportunities or to strive to be your best. And I realized that's not the purpose of ego. It's mostly just downhill, that slope. And then I read that
Well,
book and gave it to my
yeah.
younger cousin. And I just think it's an amazing.
Well, we might as well jump into it now. The thing is, when people say I can't or I won't, it's not due to an inability, it's an unwillingness because you don't want to fall on your face. You don't want to fail. And then what happens? You get angry with yourself, going, I should have taken that chance. Like, why didn't I do it? So, first, it was your ego stopping you because of embarrassment or whatever. Then you get angry that you let your ego, cannibalize the situation. And then if you just go, you know what, I'm going to fall on my face, like, what the hell? And you let go of that little bit of anger and you just realize, like, yeah, I went during the pandemic, especially, I was doing a lot of online yoga, both teaching and taking. And I was on the Peloton app. This instructor who teaches like tens of thousands of people yoga, he said, step your right foot forward. He goes, no, your left. He goes, I don't know, step a foot forward. Like he forgot where he was. And I thought, wow, I shouldn't feel so bad when I do that. And then you see them doing balance postures and they fall over and they're like, balance isn't with me today. And they always say, be with the wobbles. The wobbles are your body telling you, like, getting stronger, figuring things out. And you know what? It's your ego. When you fall, it's just your ego that's bruised. Like, just get back up. Little kids, what do? They jump back up. They don't care. But we let our ego get in the way. And it's funny when they say be with the wobbles, like it's just your body figuring it out.
Yeah. I think now that we're already on the topic, I did want to talk about this a little bit because this was like most of the questions I send you are selfish. I want to hear the answer because I want to learn from it. But I think this can apply to so many people because I'll give you a little bit of backstory. Is when I first started out my career, while you have the knowledge from the textbook, if you haven't done something a few times, you feel a little bit scared to do it. And for me, I found that it wasn't so much I was scared of the wobbles. I was scared of, let's say, stepping on someone's toes next to me, harming the client that I'm working with, or in your guys' industry, harming the patient, causing pain, doing harm, which is, the oath to not do any. And so it wasn't the embarrassment of not knowing, it was the, can I do this? I don't want to hurt this person. So when it comes to falling on your face and all that, how did you mentally get over that hump of, I'm not so worried about the embarrassment, I'm worried about making a mistake and harming my patient or harming the person in front of me?
You're going to make mistakes. That's the thing, and you have to be willing to make mistakes. And there are dentists or there's practitioners of anything, whether you could be a cook, you could be anything, any job. You don't progress because you're like, I'm going to stay in my little lane. I don't want to take any chances. What if I hurt somebody? And we're not saying experiment going, yeah, I'm going to try putting in implants. I watched a YouTube video. Well, okay. And I always say, if you can't handle the infection, don't put in the implant. Or if you can't handle the fallout of whatever procedure you're doing, again, that's the thing about not owning the result. As long as you're doing your job with good intentions, you're conscientious, you're educated, you're trying, you're getting the right mentorship, and you have a co-pilot. Look, when we learn to drive, there's always somebody there before, so there's nothing wrong with shadowing or having someone come to your office who's more experienced to walk or bring your patient to their office and do it with them, which a lot of people do. And the surgeon's happy to do it. You know what I mean? But staying in your lane, not trying to be all things to all people. They actually, I read this thing, the 10,000 hour rule was actually from a book called Peak by Poole and Erickson. It wasn't Malcolm Gladwell.
I thought it was Outliers. Yeah.
Yeah. And he ascribed a number to it. But what they showed was it's purposeful. They tried to get people to recite lines of numbers and they crap out at 4. And then they started doing like tricks in their head and songs and grouping numbers. And then they would get up to like strings of numbers of 80, 90, 100. I can barely remember my phone number sometimes. So most people don't even know their phone number anymore. So it's that purposeful practice. If you say, I'm just going to play more golf, so great, you're going to play crappy golf more days of the week. Instead of saying, I'm going to work on my getting out of the traps, I'm going to work on my putting, or I'm going to work on my drives, being purposeful. But you are going to fail. And if you're not willing to fail, then get out of the game. You got to do something else. And that doesn't mean you're a bad person. It just means you don't have the stomach for it, or that's not for you. Better to be in a less director and just be the directed, which is great. If you know yourself well enough, then you're way ahead of everybody else. If you know, say, that's not, I don't want to be an owner. I want to stay an associate, or I'm happy to be the technician. I don't want to have the responsibility of X, Y, Z. So that's great that you know yourself, and it doesn't mean you're less than, which is how most people may view it and go, oh, you're not the boss. Well, this person probably goes to bed and sleeps really well because they know themselves and they know who they are, and they're not going out of their lane in an uncomfortable way. So recognize you're going to fall on your face, and yeah, like, what do you call someone who breaks a file in a tooth? An endodontist. What do you call someone who breaks a root? An oral surgeon, as I said in that talk you were at. So you're gonna make mistakes, but you just want to mitigate that by being prepared, not fooling yourself that you're trained, making sure you're properly trained.
Yeah, I think it also goes down to, just like you said, knowing yourself and also being a good communicator. If you've built that rapport with your patient, and they understand, having that conversation afterwards, if I made a mistake or this went wrong, it just makes it that much easier when you actually get around to it.
And it's going to happen.
Yeah. It was something that took me a while to get over, and I think I'm over it now, but yeah, it was. And I've heard that.
You're not over it. Mm-hmm. You're handling it better.
Yeah. I think that's what it is.
I just heard a quote from Mayim Bialik, from Jeopardy, and she was on The Big Bang Theory. Anyways, she said, the world's always going to be crazy. There's always going to be bad crap going on. But as we get older, we've built this toolbox of resiliency and coping skills. We're just able to handle it better. It's not any worse than it probably was 20 years ago. We're just, we just hopefully have that ability to handle it better, or at least go to the right person for the right amount of help.
Yeah. And I guess speaking about the right person, I don't know if you consider yourself this, but I very much view you as an ambassador for the profession. I don't know if that was your intention or anything like that, but I think you're an ambassador for a lot of reasons. You give back, you speak, you share advice that goes beyond the scope of just the mouth. It's to do with the patient as a whole. Why is it so important for you today to keep giving back in the way you do? Because you very well could not be on today's call. You could be in Italy, it's one extra vacation a year, and not spending the time you do with the coaching clients that you have, with the Mount Sinai, the work that you're doing with all the residents and the new grads. You very well could just chill and do your own thing, but you're giving back. So why is that so important to you today?
First of all, you go through periods of life where you're acquiring knowledge, you're refining your knowledge, then you have to give back the knowledge. And if you don't give it back, if you don't, let me ask you something. Would you let the door slam in? Ladies coming with the baby carriage, would you let the door slam in her face?
No, never.
Why?
It's just not a nice thing to do.
Right. So what about someone running for the elevator? A little old lady or a gentleman is running to the elevator.
Yeah, you hold the door open just because.
Of course, we all panic and press the wrong button, but you know what I mean. You're like, oh my God, someone's coming. But the thing is, you would never do that. So why not hold the door for somebody else? Because maybe I didn't have the greatest help along the way. That doesn't mean, well, if I didn't have any help, and there are people like that, I suffered, you should suffer.
Yeah,
well, yeah. Okay, that's really kind of you. So I always figure if I, no matter what, but particularly in healthcare, you're here to be of service. And Dr. Quinones, who's the vice dean, but the head of the dental school at Western, he always taps students on the shoulder and freaks them out and says, why are you here? And you're here to be of service. He goes, how do you do that? He goes, by being your best. So if you can help somebody, advocacy, some people don't have a seat at the table. Some people don't have a voice. Some people can't even get their foot in the door, so it's great to help them. But at the end of the day, we want to help them self-advocate, give them a fish, eat today, teach them to fish, all these silly proverbs actually have a lot of meaning.
Yeah.
They actually, they've lasted the test of time for a reason. So for me, I didn't intend on doing this, but if I can help somebody and if I can stop somebody from walking in the middle of the road and getting hit by a car, metaphorically, then I'm going to do it. And a lot of people get too competitive and they're just like, well, I don't want to give anybody a leg up. I don't want to teach someone my secrets. There's lots of patients out there. There's lots of clients out there. There's lots of everything out there. You know what? If you and I were in the same business, we would skew to different groups. When I moved my office many years ago, there was another orthodontist on the floor, and I called her and I said, I'm moving on. She's like, great, we can share emergencies. It'll be good to see you. And I said, you're okay with it? She said, when her father opened the orthodontic clinic, he looked for where all the other orthodontists were. You know why? He goes, well, that must be where all the kids are. So he says, I might as well open up my office there. And you're going to skew to a different dynamic or a different group of people. And there's room for everybody. If you focus so much on what everybody else is doing, you're not doing what you're doing. You have a laser, I'm going to get a laser. Well, you've been doing it longer and using it better. So now I've just got this hunk of machinery. I don't even know what to do with it. Probably going to end up blowing a hole through the wall or something. Like, I don't know how to use it. So I think we all have a responsibility to, extend that hand, hold the door open. So, put your foot in the door for somebody else. And you know what? A lot of my opportunities, I asked, speaking opportunities, I said, some people think they want to hear me speak. If you like it, great. If you don't hire me back. Or when I went out to meet people as a specialist, I'd say, and if I knew, or they said, I always said to Dr. Smith, I'm like, oh, great, they're great, but if you ever need a second opinion, I'm happy to be your number two.
Yeah, I think it's tough, especially in dentistry. Like, I'll give you an example. I have a client right now, and he opened up a practice recently, and in his complex, there's like 6 other dentists. It's a big complex, but still 6 other dentists in one complex. It's like, there's so much competition and all this. And I really just said there, number one, there's an endless number of patients. I asked him, I said, if I gave you 10,000 patients today, could you handle them? And he's like, no. He's like, you probably need some help, right? He's like, yeah. So I was like, think about it like that. There's way more than 10,000 patients out there. You don't have the capacity to help them all. And I really love that you talked about not being competitive with your peers. And even that orthodontist, obviously very ahead of her time, because most people will view others as competition. But frankly, it just doesn't exist. Not in this industry.
It does theoretically, but at the end of the day, I always say when I lecture about patient experience, I say, everybody put up your hand. What do you do? Well, we run a dental office. And I said, so why should I go to you?
Yeah.
You all do, you do fillings, you do cleanings, you do all these things. Yeah. So I said, so what's the difference? The experience the patient has in your office, the experience the patient has under your care. They're not going to have that exact experience with somebody else. Focus more on the experience you're giving your patient, or that they have in your clinic or under your care, than worrying about what everybody else is doing. It's always great to keep an eye and understand trends and, learn from other people, but don't see them as the enemy. In my older office building, one of the orthodontists there, she used to call me down to say, this is Dr. Freeman from upstairs. I want his opinion. Like, there was no ego. All she wanted to do was get to figure out what is the best thing for this person. So I would come downstairs from my orthodontic office to her orthodontic office, and we would talk. And in front of the patient, she goes, this is Dr. Freeman. He's an orthodontist upstairs. Like, she had no ego, like none. And we coexisted, and we still are friends today. Nobody lies on their deathbed going, I did 4,012 implants, and dies and goes, or says 2027, I made the most money ever. Who cares? But if that's your only benchmark for your success, so I always tell younger practitioners or anybody, what do you want your legacy to be? They're like, dude, I'm 22. I'm like, yeah, start figuring it out now. Don't figure out your legacy when you're 97, because it's a little late to do anything about it. I said, figure it out now. And when you ask retired dentists, what do they miss? The interaction. They miss that talking to people. They miss being social. So let me tell you, you're going to have a much more rewarding time in life. And there's a selfish component to that 100%. But you're going to have a much more rewarding time engaging others, being around others, giving them a leg up, helping them, and seeing them succeed than anything else. You know what I mean? You're not, all you do is measure your career success by money or whatever. Laurie Santos, she has a great, the Happiness Lab. She has a great series of podcasts. And I went to Yale online for free, but don't worry, I'm not putting it on my, I'm not saying I went to Yale on my, some people take an online course and they have like,
they do that. Yeah.
They have the thing for Yale on their slides. And I'm like, really? Do you even know where Yale is? And they're like,
people do it.
It's in the United States. Yeah, close. Okay. So anyways, it's a big country. So anyways, so if you earn a certain amount of money, I can't remember what it was at the time, 75, $80,000, and you have a roof over your head, food on the table, you're able to put a little money away, and your needs are met, you're not going to be any happier making more money. Yes, you'll be able to have more things, but at the end of the day, what they found is it's experiences.
Mm-hmm.
And they even did a project. They did a study where people would give money and they said, well, how happy are you? They went to one of the poorest countries where they gave somebody $5 and they said, you can keep it or you can give 4 of it to somebody else. These people who are struggling to eat and put a roof over their head gave the money to other people and they were thrilled about it. They felt so much better. And that's the thing. You feel so much better. It's so great to give and to help and everything else. And it is, again, selfish because it's great for you. It's great for your mind, your body, your health, but you're also helping, you're paying it forward, as they say. And, you know, some people don't want to teach. They're, I'm not going to train my competition. I'm like, come on, you know, seriously?
I think that's focusing too much, like you said, on your selfish needs. And there's a quote you said, and I love it, and I might butcher it here, but you said something along the lines of, "It's a privilege to look after your own needs, and it's an honor to look after the needs of others."
Yeah,
And I
not my
find that
quote. I don't know who said it, but
we're gonna say you said it.
no, we're not.
And,
No.
but it was, I love that quote wherever it came from because it gets rid of competition. It gets rid of, oh, I need to do X amount of fillings and X amount of this to hit this certain financial number or whatever the case is. I can't tell you how many conversations that I have with clients, and I'm like, let's just slow down. I promise you will be wealthy. Unless you develop a gambling addiction, you start doing some crazy stuff, we work together. I promise you will be rich. So let's focus on let's focus on you getting there.
And let's take those 2 words out of the conversation, wealthy and rich, because
Very different.
what do they mean? And it's not about money. Because
that's exactly it.
There's a lot of people with mega millions who are miserable and curled up in the fetal position every night going, I hate my life. And why aren't I happy in my 23,000 square foot house?
Mm-hmm.
You know, so, and that's why I don't like, and Laurie Santos talks about this on one of the podcasts. And I've always said, I love the word content, not happy. Happy is a challenge. Happy's like, I got to be happy today. Christ, that's a challenge. I want, you know, if I could be content, yeah, it's like, I had a good day. That was a nice orange I ate, you know, like, oh, this glass of water is refreshing. If we celebrate those little things along the path, you know what I mean? And I know it may sound silly, especially coming from me, people who knew me then and now, they'd be like, seriously? Mm-hmm. Yeah. But when you do things that are all performative, it's just like, I'm humbled to, okay, you know, there's the humble brag. That's great. And maybe people are humble about it, but it's just, you know, I always marveled at the people, you know, would say you'd be in the hospital, would say donation of 15 to 20 million, anonymous.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
You know, but it's how do you measure your success, your contentment? And it's not about money and it's not about how many implants you put in or anything else. And let's talk about that success. Mm-hmm. Ask your clients, how many new patients you get a month? 47. Yeah. I'm like, oh, okay. Whoa, you know, that's off the top of your head. Mm-hmm. Great. What percent of those 47 people you get every month go ahead with their treatments? And they're like, yeah, I have no idea. I'm like, oh, so you get 47 patients and what if only 3 of them like agree to their treatment plan? What do you mean? And then I say, well, how many patients do you lose a month? And they're like, I don't know. And I said, of the patients you don't know you're losing every month, why are they leaving? And I've heard people say, oh, it's, you know, it's not a great economic area, or it's not this, it's not that. You know, I know these two ladies on a dental practice, they were restoring implants more than practices in very, you know, more socioeconomically advanced parts of town. And the rep said, why? They said, we've always treated everybody the same. We always, if somebody didn't have money, we helped them out, and then they got a job, then they got insurance, or then their situation changed. Mm-hmm. And that's the problem. You cannot treat people differentially. You don't know what their priorities are. If you come to me, I can't be looking you up and down and going, oh, he can't afford this, I'm not going to present this plan. Who am I to decide for you? When you come in, I go, these are the plans. What is your priority? How do I know that somebody's not helping you with this, or that you haven't been saving for this, or this means a lot to you? You know, and this is the thing, I always trick people because I read this in a Disney business book once. I always say we always treat people the way we want to be treated. And they're like, oh yeah, yeah. No, you treat them the way they want to be treated. Guess what? You're doing a buccal pit restoration. You're like, oh, it's just a buccal pit. Well, or maybe it's deep enough you still have to freeze the patient. Maybe you have to put a rubber dam on for whatever. So you're using a needle, you're using a drill, you're putting, whether it's an MOBD LMNOP restoration or an occlusal, you still have to have all those steps. So to the patient, it's like, whoa, there's a drill involved. So these are things that you have to be aware of, that we sometimes lose sight of the whole situation, and that we don't remember why we're there, and we don't remember what it is we're doing, and then we think these things. And this is what Laurie Santos talks about. We miswant.
Yeah.
We think this will make us happy, and then they say, well, if I get into this school, I'll be happy. If when I open my first practice, I'll be happy. When this happens, I'll be happy. So you keep moving the damn finish line or happiness line. You're never going to be happy because you're never going on the other side of it.
Yeah.
Instead of saying, wow, I got into school. I got into dental school. Great. Competition's over. I'm thrilled. But then everybody just pushes the bar.
Yeah, you just keep moving it. And it's very much like, I know there's a lot of coaches who train athletes who do like short-term sprints, those sprinters or the marathon runners that you have to run past the finish line, because we as humans start celebrating before the finish line even gets there. And then by the time you get there, you move it again and it just keeps moving. And I'm glad you brought that up, because going back to my point around telling clients that, hey, I promise you, you will be wealthy. I do that not to talk about them being wealthy. It's so that now that we've taken that off the table, you're no longer looking at that stupid goalpost. Let's actually enjoy the game. Let's actually enjoy the run. Let's talk about how your muscles feel, metaphorically speaking, on this run or reaching that finish line, instead of worrying about that finish. We've already discussed it. You're fine. You'll reach that finish line, no problem. Let's talk about the stuff that actually matters. Because the problem with financial goals is they're very easy, even coming back to the patients. How many patients are you seeing? It's very easy to set that goal because it's concrete. There's a number. It's easier to reach towards it, but none of those things matter. It's all those things that you cannot describe about the friendships you have and the things you can't put in quantitative terms that make up your life. That orange you eat, the extra time you spend with your family. That's the stuff that matters. And so that's why I bring it up with with clients. But yeah, we have this tendency to just look for the quantitative stuff. I don't know, that's just humans or if that's medicine or whatever the case that is, but
social media.
Yeah, so we look for the number, the likes, the amount of money, the number of patients. No one talks about the experience.
About that, I'm sure everybody's seen the video of the person looks to see who the runner behind him is.
And then they blow past them
and wins, and you're like, what the hell? Somebody else darts ahead of them because they were too focused on everybody but themselves. That's number one. And number two, it's just like you said, really, when you take a step back and reflect, what have I loved about the last 5 years, 10 years? What haven't I? What are my challenges? But what have I liked? And when you start to focus back on the things that really bring you some satisfaction in your practice, it's, seeing those people. Like, you go to your clients, I want you to do this. Go to your more established clients and say, what do you think your biggest success is? How many crowns have you done in the last 10 years? And I was saying, I don't know.
I don't care.
I don't remember. Or what, have you ever done a full mouth reconstruction? And they're like, yeah, or no, yeah. And then you say to them, have you ever found oral cancer? They're like, oh yeah, it was 1983. It was January. Why? Because of the connection they had with that patient who maybe they had to deliver bad news, or that they found something that they didn't know was there, and they got them the care in the right amount of time. That's what they'll remember on their deathbed. They're not going to remember how many crowns they did or implants they put in or what their T4 said at the end of the day. That's not it. So if you can focus on that fact and think about that, you're further ahead of the game.
I couldn't agree more. And I want to talk about this because on the topic of honestly caring for your patients, treating them like humans, because that's the stuff you're going to remember, not how many crowns you've done or how much money you've made. It's those experiences, you said something, again, I'm going to butcher this, but you talked about how oral surgery is not like surgery. It's making sure that people can have dinner with their family. It's
100%.
It's blowing it up of this is so much more than it needs to be.
It's
I
not
used to,
it's not the procedure. Sorry.
yeah,
It's not
no,
the procedure.
it absolutely isn't. And I'm so glad you said that, because I used to joke. My biggest pet peeve, my wife gets on me about this because I actually get a little bit frustrated with people about this, is I'm a big believer in taking pride in whatever you're doing, whatever your job is. I don't care what it is. I don't care if you are a janitor and you don't perceive that as an important job. It absolutely is. Because if you, let's say you miss a spot on the floor and that person trips, and it's a single mom and she hurts her back and now her kids are going to, like, I'll extrapolate that action of you need to take pride in what you do because you are impacting someone, whether you know it or not. Now, that line of thinking, I feel like you have that same line of thinking. I've heard it in the way you talk about patient care. Is there a line, though, of being too empathetic or getting too involved with your patients? Because you work with people who have chronic pain. How do you separate the work from home? How do you avoid becoming too empathetic or caring too much? Or is there no point in even bothering doing that and just treating everyone like a human and not like a patient?
Well, there's a lot written on this, and how do I do it badly? So it's very hard not to, empathy. And there's a great article by Jill Suttie, Suttie, on empathy. Empathy is about putting yourself in someone else's shoes. And sometimes you can't. Like, you just have to sit next to them, as Dr. Offrey says, sit on the park bench and share their gaze, because like I can't fathom. Never say to somebody, I understand what you're going through, because you don't. I always use the example, if a lady's in labor and I was the doctor coming in and go, I know how much it hurts. She's going to be like hell you do. Say like, no, you do not. And I'm sure some expletives will come out. But if I said to her, wow, I'll never know what this feels like. I know it's excruciating. The anesthesiologist is running down the hall. She's got your epidural. You know what I mean? That's a different story. So I think it's, they talk about trying to have that detachment, but then they say that can be even more difficult, because going back to Dr. Santos, one of the podcasts is don't think about the white bear. So they had all these students. It was a long ago psychological experiment that was sort of redone, or someone developed an experiment based on a concept by, I think it was Dostoevsky, the author. So she had these people in a room and they said, don't think of the white bear. And when you think of the white bear, press the bell. What did you hear? Ding, 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 ding. Like everybody's, so when someone tells you don't think of something, that's all you think about. So, and you know how much energy you use, physical and mental, to ignore something? To the point where it makes you sick.
Mm.
And the example again of Holocaust survivors, or people who survived traumas, when they talked about it, shared their story, and they followed up with them a year later, less visits to the hospital, their health was better, their psychological health was better, because they unburdened themselves. Think of Alcoholics Anonymous. People get up, or Narcotics Anonymous, get up and say, I'm an addict or an alcoholic, and when they do that, they're like, it's not this secret. I always say, if you ignore the elephant in the room, the elephant's going to keep eating and destroy your house, so you have to be mindful of that. So I recognize that I can't help everybody, and that my job is not to always solution everything. Sometimes I'm going to sit on my hands and I'm just going to hear what they have to say. And they're thrilled that somebody does that. I had a patient, she was going through her history model, and I put my hand up, I go, please stop talking so fast. I said, I can't write this stuff down. Mm. And she started crying. Mm. I said, why are you crying? She goes, every other doctor tells me to speed up. You're the first person who told me to slow down. Guess what? If I get my questions answered and I let her talk, I'm going to get the right answer that will hopefully help me find the diagnosis. And I always quote Dr. Offrey, who says the average healthcare practitioner cuts people off after 8 to 12 seconds.
Yeah, I remember you saying that.
And if you let them talk, they talk for 90. Yeah, it may feel like 9 years sometimes, but like, you want to be heard, they want to be heard. If you stood at a counter at Starbucks, you wouldn't stand there for 20 minutes. If someone ignored you, after about 30 seconds, you'd be like, I'm out of here. So it's acknowledging people. That's how you deal with tough situations. You're mad at me, you say, I can't believe you're not more upset. You're being pretty good about this. You're going to go like this. Oh, because I'm agreeing with you, because there's something, there's the backfire. There's a few psychological phenomena in communication, but one of them is, if I go into the world, let's say I'm behind. Oh my God, I'm so sorry I'm behind. Did someone not come out and tell you I'm behind? Come on in. Or can you stay? If not, I'll stay late. I'll come early. What can I do to accommodate you? You're going to doc. It's okay. These things happen. Now, if you come in after I kept you waiting for, let's say 15 minutes, when you've been waiting 15 minutes and you don't know you're going to be waiting 15 minutes, what does the patient come in? I've been out there for an hour and a half. And you're like, okay, really? So I've had patients that came a half an hour early and I still got to them 15 minutes early. And they're like, I've been waiting a half an hour. It's like, your appointment's not for another 15 minutes. I said, you're lucky I don't keep you back out there for 15 minutes. Like, cut me some slack. So, it's all about expectation. But the other thing is, if you were to come in then after I kept you waiting, I'm like, yeah, busy day, have a seat. You'd be like, okay, buddy, I've been out there, and like, that's all you say to me. So if I go into the world, you go, no big deal. If I go, no big deal, guess where you're going?
It's a huge deal. Yeah, exactly.
And it's so simple.
Mm-hmm.
But then we get our ego in the way, and they're like, well, I've been busy. I haven't had time to pee. And it's like, okay. But like, I've said to patients, I sit them down. I said, I'm sorry, bio break. I'll be right back. I've been trying to go for the last 4 hours. And when you're honest, they see you're human.
Yeah. Especially with all that PPE on and all these things, you're not a human. And now all of a sudden, hey, I got to go pee. Oh, this isn't a robot.
You have no idea how smart what you said is. And thank you. It reminded me of something. That's why I put a button of what your face looks like, or pop your mask down and go, hey, this is who I am. Because otherwise you're just this faceless thing and like, why wouldn't I yell at you? I wouldn't be able to pick you out of a police lineup. And that's the problem. We've dehumanized people. People are used to fighting with people from behind a screen. And they're screaming and yelling, and people are still upset, pent up frustration, anger from the pandemic, all these different things. And people are not handling. They were barely handling it well before. And things did not, when the world shut down, that didn't help anybody. So recognizing we're all human, humanizing yourself to other people. I was talking to a psychologist once, and she had the classic old school soprano, like the Sopranos office, where somebody sat and the previous client would go out another door.
Oh, okay.
Like the real old school, 2 entrances. So anyways, when you talk to psychologists, I'd kill for an office like that, like the old school thing. So when Tony Soprano comes in, somebody else walked out the other door. So she miscalculated, and 2 people were in the waiting room at the same time, or something. One didn't, I don't know what happened. And she was mortified. And they said, it's okay, doctor. At least we know you're human. Like when I watch other yoga instructors struggle with their balance, I'm like,
yeah.
I'm teaching 8 people. She's teaching 8,000. And she's just like, yeah, I fell. Big deal. Get back up.
On that note, there was a funny video I saw recently, and it was LeBron James, and he was shooting free throws at practice or something. And I believe one of his teammates' sons was watching him, and he misses a shot, and he looks at him. He said, I missed so that you know I'm human. And I just thought it was the funniest thing ever, because it's exactly what you said. We look up to these people as if they're not human. And sometimes that's actually, I would just say this, it's always detrimental, because either you set this expectation on this person that they're going to do things that just no one is going to do, or worse is you're going to mistreat them if they do mess up because you forget that they're human. So I'm so glad just you talked about that.
Yeah, that's a big thing.
Yeah. And so one thing I do know about you is that I'll say this is I think you're an amazing communicator, not just obviously in our conversation, but how you talk about patient care and how you talk about framing certain just ways of greeting them, knowing Farsi, a couple words so that you can make someone a little bit more calm. All these things that you do to just make your patients have a better experience. When or how did you become so good at this? Was it just years of reps? Was there certain books, certain courses?
Yeah, I mean,
how do you get to that?
I like how you said reps. Sorry to step on your words. I like how you said reps, because I want to jump on that. It's a skill.
Mm-hmm.
Like, you don't go into the gym and go, yeah, I'm just gonna lift up these 80-pound dumbbells. You go,
you work your way up.
You gotta work your way up. So the thing for me is that I'm unendingly curious.
Yeah.
I want to know everything about everybody. I want to hear their story. Tell me something interesting. I actually have a great idea for a potential like Instagram channel that I don't want to say anything, but I think it would be hysterical. Like I suddenly realized the other day, I was like, oh, this would be fantastic because I want to learn about people's lives. And when you do that, you humanize yourself to them and them to you. And they're not just a set of teeth and you're not just the tooth worker. You know what I mean? And, that's the part that everybody misses when you're done. And if you just looked at it as the technician and you just look at the person as the sort of container of teeth, you're just going to be miserable and you're going to hate your job. And yet, like you mentioned before, there's different people have different jobs in the world. Some people are cleaning the office, some people are working in the office. Guess what? If the person cleaning the office isn't there, you can't work in the office. So we tend to stratify people in our minds that, oh, well, they're this. And then we create the story in your head about who this is. Like, back up a second. Why are you judging someone based on what they do or how they dress or anything else? Like, you're not in that position. People in glass houses shouldn't throw stones, as they say, but why are you judging? You shouldn't judge. And everybody's doing something of value to both themselves and to other people. And just say, oh, this person just books the appointments. Well, guess what, buddy? If someone wasn't booking your appointments, you'd have an empty chair. So why are we diminishing people's contributions? And we're all in this together. And when you start to realize that we can't function without each other, then I think you start to behave with a little more grace. And you sort of understand yourself and other people a lot better, because I think we have this idea in our head that you have to be doing X and making X to be content or happy, and you're not. There's a lot of people with a lot of money paying $300 an hour because they're miserable to see a psychologist. So, and in terms of the communication piece, not only is it about communicating with other people, you better have that conversation with yourself. So when I coach people, I always say to them, can you look in the mirror, look at yourself in the eyes and say, I'm smart, I'm capable, I'm a good person. They should want to take someone like me. They're like, no.
Yeah.
So
at least without feeling like a phony saying it.
Right. I said, well, how are you going to walk into a room of strangers and convince them that you're right for their school or right for their clinic or right for their job? And that's when they're like, because nobody wants to. Most people are not braggers. They don't want to say, well, I'm great. It's the whole concept of faking it till you are it, as a yoga instructor told me, not till you make it, till you are it, till you really embody what it is. It's like dressing for the job you want. You have to have that sort of sense of self, but people don't have that conversation with themselves. Meditation, as I was taught, is not about eliminating all thoughts from your mind. Meditation is just about, there's a thought. Why is my stomach clenching with that thought? Or why are my fists clenching with that thought? How am I connecting the physical to the mental or the emotional? So communication starts with yourself before it starts with anybody else. And that's the piece that is missing with everybody. Because if you're bubbling hot and you're in a bad mood and you go in to have a conversation and you're not realizing that you've got a frown on your face or you're miserable.
Yeah, you're going to, whether you know it or not, it's gonna come out. It's people feel the energy of you being angry, and you could say all the right things, but they'll feel it.
I always say, we're not all Meryl Streep. We're not all great. We're not all Academy, multiple Academy nominated, Academy winning actors and actresses. We're just, we're human. And I always tell some people, don't ever play poker, because everything you think is on your face, and you're sort of like, yeah, I'm happy to be here. How can I help you? And you're like, oh, okay. No, you're not. And people sense that. And that's when you have to take a breath, go outside, breathe some fresh air. One of the best things I read was, if you were angry and someone stuck a mirror in front of your face when you were angry, you'd
start laughing. I feel like I'd start laughing if I saw it.
Because imagine someone putting a mirror in your face, or like, and you're like, oh God, that is not a good look. So, and one of the other things that you mentioned about communication, that it's not this esoteric skill. So I was with one of my former residents, Josh. He was in the program with his sister, Jen, and he had spent some time with me in the morning with some facial pain patients. And I said, Josh, when someone comes in and says, I've been in pain for 5 years, like, oh, do you floss? Yeah. You don't just, you say, you've been in pain for 5 years? That sucks. So I said, acknowledge it. That's all people want. They just want to make sure that you're hearing them. So he was in Emerge later that afternoon, and he texted me after. He said, "You were so right." And I was like, "I'd love to hear that, of course." And I said, "What happened?" He said, this much older lady came in with her daughter and had been in excruciating pain. I think it was neuropathic pain at the time. She's been in pain like this, for many years, but this pain has been, for the last 3 days. And he said to her, "You've been in pain for years, and like you've been writhing in pain for the last 3 days." He says, "I feel terrible." What do you think happened?
She probably just like
everybody was crying. He goes, Josh even said, he wanted to cry, because he could see the pain literally on this person's face. And that's, how much better she felt just knowing that somebody actually cared or, gave a toss about what was going on in their lives. Acknowledgement is key, whether you're standing in a lineup at a Starbucks waiting for the barista to look up at you. And guess what? Maybe they had a rough day. Maybe they're a single parent. Maybe they're looking after an elderly parent. Maybe their dog is sick. Everybody's got a story. And when you ask them questions and share that story, you humanize each other. And guess what? Communication just happens.
I like that you said that you just start thinking of what's going on in their day. And it's funny, my wife jokes with me because I do this, but she says I romanticize everyone. For example, if someone makes a mistake, I'll think, oh, they must, like, let's say someone cuts me off. I'm like, oh, they must be in a rush to go somewhere. Maybe their dog is sick and they're quickly trying to get to the vet or something like that. And she's like, you just romanticize everyone. But I don't think it's that. You almost gave me like permission to keep being that way because it's humanizing everyone. It's thinking they must be going through something. That's why they're acting this way, and it's giving them grace.
Which is better? Would your wife like? Would she like you to come home and go, "This guy cut me off"? I'm like, I'm not eating dinner. I'm still angry. You know what I mean? Instead of going, because when someone cuts you off, I don't think they got up in the morning and said, "I'm going to cut somebody off." Oh. So let's say they do cut you off and they weren't very kind on the road. They're driving off, like having, listening to music. Now your day is ruined. You're freaking out. You're angry. You're going to go meet a client angry. You're going to come home angry. Guess what? You're not romanticizing. You're just like, that is what it is. And I'm not going to let it get to me. And you embody perfectly. Things and people don't irritate you unless what?
Unless you give them permission to. Yeah. Yeah. And I think that's exactly it, of it also just not taking anything personally. It's not inflating your ego that you're the center of the world. That person has things going on in their life. They don't care about you. Like, I don't know if that's because of social media thing that we just think everyone's looking at us and we're the center of the universe. And no one cares about you, man. Just, like no one cares. They didn't cut you off, or if they didn't do that bad thing to you out of malicious intent. They're probably just living their life and you got caught in the crosshair.
It's not that they don't care, so to speak. It's just you're not their immediate concern. And that's why when kids say, "I can't wear braces," everybody look at me, and I said, "Everybody's not looking at you. You're wonderful, but trust me, I've seen people walk into poles, looking at their phone, or almost walk into oncoming traffic. So calm down, But we fall into this trap that everybody's looking at us, and they're not. They can barely look at themselves in the mirror. They're better looking at you. I went on a camping trip to Alaska once, and I think I had one shower during the week. We had to put quarters in the shower. It was terrible. And so I got back to Anchorage, and I stayed in this hotel. It was like I took a shower for about 2.5 hours. I just stood there, And I looked in the mirror. I had this massive zit on my head, and I hadn't known the whole week. If I had known the whole week, I would have had a crappy week. The whole time I would have been like this. But because I didn't know it, I was myself.
Yeah.
So there's a lot to be said for that we look at ourselves too much. People are taking selfies too much, and people are so in their own faces. You spend a little less time looking at pictures of yourself. Spend a little more time going inside your own head and going, what's going on?
100%.
Having the conversation with yourself.
Absolutely. And then just, I would say, pouring into others. It's very hard to focus on yourself if you are acting out of service, if that makes sense. You have less of that negative self-talk. Remember how you said that I am, looking at yourself in the mirror and saying, I am important, I am doing all these, X, Y, and Z things. Personally, I found I can only have that conversation when I'm in service to the world. I can then strongly say, yes, I am an important person, or I am doing things that are good, or maybe I am right for this person only when I'm acting out of service. Otherwise, I feel like, forgive my language, I feel like a
Look,
douchebag. I feel like someone who's
everybody's
just, just taking advantage of the world.
everybody's got their own, their own shtick. Everybody's got their own problems. I saw something on Instagram and someone said, "What would happen if you won the lottery?" She said, "You'd get therapy, you'd get therapy, you'd get therapy." So, and it's true. We all need therapy, and we all have a journey, and the whole thing is just, and the other quote that's so corny, but I love it, is comparison is the thief of joy. You keep looking at everybody else like you're just miserable all the time because you think, oh, I don't have, instead of saying what you do have. There was this young lady, she was an immigrant to Canada. Her parents were physicians in another country, came here, qualified as ultrasound technicians, and, had a life, didn't have a life, came back and rebuilt a life, And I said to her when she opened up her clinic, I said, "How many rooms is there?" She says, "4." I said, "Well, how many chairs are you putting in?" She says, "1." I said, "Why only putting in 1?" She says, "Because I can only sit my ass in 1 chair at a time." She goes, "I don't have any patience." She says, She says, "What do I need 4 empty rooms?" She goes, "I'll have 1. And when that room gets busy, I'll open up another." And I used the orange analogy because I remember we were sitting at lunch once and I taught her and her classmates because I was years ahead of them. And she opened this orange. She goes, "Oh, smell this orange. This is the juiciest orange." And I thought, she's got it. Like, she's figured it the hell out. Like, she's rhapsodizing about an orange instead of just shoving it in her mouth and barely realizing she ate it. Like, she's observing, she's in the moment and like, whoa. I aspire to that.
Mm-hmm. You, I do really like that story of people who are just in the moment. I do have a standard 3 questions, and
yeah, you know what? It's funny because I really
you perfectly guided me into this as if it was planned. Well, I do have the 3 questions that I ask all of our guests, and you just talked about being inspired. But who would you say is your biggest inspiration? And I know it's a bit of a loaded question. There's probably so many people that come to mind, but if you could give me like 1 or 2 that really just at the front of your brain when you think of who inspires you, who is that for you?
You're gonna hate me for this, but anybody who is just engaged in what they're doing, trying, learning, pushing, falling on their face, getting back up. There's nobody that comes to my mind. Like, yeah, it could be, say, Gandhi, or Helen Keller. I could come out and say something so performative, but at the end of the day, it's somebody who's engaged, somebody who just keeps going, somebody who just, shakes off the knocks, holds the door for somebody else. To me, that's what I aspire to be. So in terms of who's my inspiration, anybody that's just out there killing it, trying and extending their hand to somebody else. I can't, there's probably lots of examples, and I'd love to give you, everybody comes up with some great celebrity example, but, to me, my example is like, Fred the Butcher, who's just happy-go-lucky guy and, is happy to make sure you got a fresh chicken, and loves what he does. So to me, that's the most important thing.
I actually really love that answer because you can find inspiration from everyday people. And I think that kind of summarizes, in my opinion, what I know about you on a surface level. It summarizes you. You care about people. You just genuinely do. And I really do love that answer.
I try.
Yeah.
Do my best. Now,
what was my next question? Yeah, my next question was, what's next for you personally as Bruce, and professionally as Dr. Freeman? Because I know as Bruce, you do a million things. You got morning floss, or I guess that's professional. You do the yoga, you bake, you cook. You were showing me all these things that you make, and I was like, this is intense. So maybe walk me through Bruce and Dr. Freeman. What's next?
Yeah, I just want to learn. Just like that patient of mine, I've been studying Italian. I decided to become a yoga instructor for myself. And yeah, I taught yoga during the whole pandemic, and I still, teach breathing techniques. I do all these things for the people that I coach. I coach people trying to get into professional school. And somebody just texted me who's really struggled to get in. And at the event we were at, said to me, how do you handle disappointment? And so many people there shared that sentiment. And you know, we had some great conversations, did some coaching, and this person just sent me a picture, and they got into dental school, and sent me a picture in front of the school. And to me, that was, you know, I got choked up by that. This is somebody who's worked so hard and wanted it so badly, and, you know, really, really is a good person, and, you know, was able to get to where they wanted to go. So, you know, I'm actually taking on more time at the hospital to see more chronic pain patients, working at Toronto Western, you know, in the neurosurgery clinic, coaching people, creating stuff. People go, you know, how come you're not, you know, how do you eat all that stuff? You look fit. And I'm just saying, because I eat this much and I give this much away. Otherwise, you know, I wouldn't be able to leave my house.
Yeah.
You know, because I'd be baking all the time. So it's that creation, that figuring out the chemistry. So to me, I think that's one of the keys to longevity, is to always being curious and wanting to learn. And, you know, I always asked grandparents when they would bring the kids to the office, you know, oh, it must be great, you're retired. And they're like, don't ever do it. Whatever you do, they're like, don't retire. And I asked retired dentists, and I said, what do you miss most? They said, the people. So keep being engaged, keep being fascinated, ask questions, be inquisitive, strike up a conversation with somebody, you know, and I think that to me that's what I want to do. I just want to keep learning stuff. And guess what? I'm happy to know I don't know what's next.
I like that. Yeah, there's no planning, just like at the start of your career. I also wanted to ask about your coaching and I guess mentorship that you provide to people. Is how did that start? I think, correct me if I'm wrong, it was just one of your friends whose, I believe, daughters wanted to go to dentistry school, and they just sort of grew from that.
He said, can you coach her? And I'm like, look, I don't know what to tell her. But she was sitting like this. I go, sit up straight. And I'm thinking, oh, this could be fun. Someone's going to pay me to bark at them. And it's like, I'm in. So then I just started, it just grew organically. So I've helped now close to probably 600 people trying to get forward in their careers in terms of learning how to be interviewed, learning about themselves, and now coaching healthcare practitioners and even people in business who just struggle with communication, struggle with how to handle difficult communications, upset clients or upset patients. So I love it when someone texts me and said, I did exactly, you know, I listened to what you said. I said that one line and boom, like it made the difference. And I'm thinking, and it's not that complicated. It's just being aware. It's just being aware of all that. So I love doing that.
Are you still taking on new, I guess, clients or people under the mentorship?
Well, every year it's interesting. You know, people I've coached for medicine, dentistry, law, psychology school, and all the different specialties. One of them called me 10 years later and said, I'm finishing my residency. He goes, I trust your opinion. Do you think you could help me find a wife? I was just like,
yeah, the new matchmaker.
I actually recently set him up on a blind date. I don't know if anything happened, but it's just like, yeah, I'll give it a kick at the can. Like, why not? I love connecting people, which is fun. And yeah, I take on new people all the time because some are finite. And, you know, my job is not to keep them hanging on forever. My job is to help them through, get them where they want to go, and then let them go. And if they need something, come back.
Like that. Yeah, you're kind of like the Indian matchmaker now, or not.
Yeah.
It's not the Indian matchmaker, but yeah.
But you know what? Here's something. Oh, I made a note about this because I love Seema Auntie. You know, they come and they say, well, what do you want out of life? What are you looking for in a life partner? Well, they have to be this tall, they have to have this much hair, this, and you see her just going, okay. And that's
when I stopped watching. I was like, what is this nonsense?
But it's brilliant because she says, if you get 60% of what you think you want, you're off to the races. And it's true and they show all these arranged marriages where these people are giggling with each other. They've been married for 40 years and they're happy, you know, because people think they want. And she said to this one girl, you're not marrying height. What difference? You're marrying a person. And we do that with our lives. We try to say, well, I need to have this apartment, this color, that. That's not going to make you happy. You know, so that's what I loved about Seema Auntie saying, you know, like love does grow. And they've shown arranged marriages versus what they call a love match are just as successful, if not more successful. And a friend of mine who's been a marketer for Google, all these other places, she always says, you know, passion is for the bedroom, not the boardroom. You know, unbridled passion can burn the whole place down. And guess what? You're going to fall on your face when you're practicing the piano. You're not always going to hit the right note. And then you get frustrated. And then you're like, I don't want to do this anymore. Oh, I thought it was your passion. So, you know, leave that out of the conversation.
I think I've said this before in other podcasts, but I think passion is earned. You got to earn it through just years and years of doing something and knowing the tiny little differences of certain, I don't know if it's piano, of how you hit the keys. It's not something you start out with. You learn to do something over and over and you get mildly good at it and then you start getting passionate about it, I think.
But it's just, why do we always have to describe these labels?
Yeah.
Like just eat pasta, like whatever. And it's like somebody said, oh, I had a cookie today, ruined my diet, I'm gonna eat a whole bag of Oreos. I'm like, you had one cookie, like eat another, like who cares? As long as you're not eating 500 every day, like it's not the end. But then we beat ourselves up. And then when you beat yourself up for eating the cookie, cortisol, epinephrine courses through your body. And guess what? That's not helping. So eat the cookie and go, yeah, it was a damn good cookie,
Yeah.
I think croissant therapy, as a friend of mine says, who's a dentist, is the best therapy there is. Anyways, I know you have a couple other your
no. I have one more. Well, I guess two more.
No, you have two
but,
more.
If you are comfortable with sharing, what's the worst financial mistake you think you've ever made? And then on the other side of that is what's the best financial decision you think you've ever made?
The worst is maybe not buying Google or something or Xerox. No. The best, live beneath your means. Live like you're making 20, 25% less and bank your money because wealth is not about amount of money you have. It's about freedom and independence to do what you want. So I have always lived well beneath my means. And yes, I treat myself and everything else, but I know that stuff's not going to make me happy. So to me, it's about experiences. I'd rather go on a trip, a coat hanging in the closet. Like, who cares? Like, we all like to dress nicely if that's your thing. But at the end of the day, live beneath your means. I don't care how much money you're earning. Live beneath your means. A 10,000 square house is not going to make you any happier than a 1,000 square foot condo. And remember, as dental practitioners, we're victims of the industrial model. We can only make as much money as our hands will allow. So learn to try and develop passive income, whether it means investing in a property with a family member or friend, and just slowly, or as they say in Italian, piano, you'll find your way, develop some passive sources of income. But at the end of the day, live beneath your means.
I love that. I think, you honestly, you can't say it better. And I'll say this. You've mentioned it a few times that, a big fancy house and the nice cars and all this, they're not really going to do it for you. And I can personally say, I've seen every situation you could think of, from, families who are worth hundreds of millions of dollars who their children's children will never have to work again, versus people who are on the brink of homelessness and everything in between. And it really doesn't buy happiness. It genuinely does not. It buys you freedom. It definitely can buy you some freedom, which maybe will buy you some happiness, but it really doesn't do anything for you.
Freedom from what? Freedom from working, maybe?
Yeah.
Freedom from responsibility. But guess what? You can't free yourself of your own mind. Because if you have a bad relationship with yourself, all the money in the world is not going to help you.
No. And it really does not. So I think that's a perfect spot to sort of wrap up the financial question. In terms of concluding this sort of episode, I know we are coming up on an hour. Do you have any advice, let's say, to your fellow doctors, regardless of their discipline?
First of all, again, comparison is the thief of joy, like 100%. Don't keep looking at everybody else's work. Take a social media break. We get so fixated on looking at things at multiple magnification. If somebody said to you, oh, this procedure will increase, longevity of the restoration by 0.02 minutes. Well, you're not going to do it, but we get so wrapped up in minutia. So take a step back, take a meta view. One orthodontist I know, he's so funny. Whenever a patient would go, they'd hold the mirror in their face. They go, what do you think of this? He'd take their hand and he goes, why don't we move that mirror to a distance that a normal person would see something at? And have that conversation with yourself. And guess what? Meditation, as I said, is not about eliminating thoughts from your mind. Minds think, as I learned in yoga training. Let the thoughts come. Recognize how you feel in your body with the thought that's in your head. And just remember that, so much in our lives, we should just look back and go like, who cares? It doesn't matter. Not about hurting people, not about doing like, oh yeah, it's good enough. No, good is good enough. But it's just, we get so wrapped up. And I tell people starting their professional careers, don't get involved in group chats. Don't get caught up in that. You're there to become a dentist, a doctor, a lawyer, a technician. You're there to, provide a service. That you're not there to get involved in drama. You want drama, go star in a play, and we get so wrapped up in everything that doesn't matter. And build tools of resiliency, as I said, is that what Mayim Bialik said, the world's going to be crazy, bad things are going to happen, but we have to develop a skill to deal with it better and better as we get older. And that's another important thing. So when you go back, take a step back, write a narrative, write a reflection, and go like, why did that go south? Why did this relationship end? Why did I not get that promotion? Before you go blaming everybody else but yourself. The joke is if every time every restaurant in Vancouver sucks, and it's like, maybe it's not the restaurants, maybe it's the person going into the restaurants that has the big problem. What's the common denominator? So give yourself a break. Don't worry about falling flat on your face. Try. If at first you don't succeed, try again.
Yeah, I think that's a perfect spot to wrap it up. Honestly, thank you so much for letting me sit here with you, pick your brain, chat with you. I really do appreciate it. I know you have a ton of things, you're moving. There's a ton of things that you could be doing with your time. So I really do appreciate you sitting down, having a conversation with me, and dropping all the gems that you did.
Well, I appreciate you just listening to what I have to say. And if anything I can say, just even like a droplet, somebody goes, whoa, or where can I find out? Or I'm struggling with that, then message me. I'll give you all my contact information.
Yeah, I'll include it in the show notes for sure. Is Instagram probably the best spot to reach?
Yeah, Instagram is the fastest, easiest way, and just drop into the DMs and as kids say, and I'll respond right away. But it's just like we're all in this together. We're all struggling together. We're all trying to figure it out. Nobody's got it all figured out, and stop thinking everybody does. That's one of the beauties of aging. You just don't give a crap about half the stuff. It's like, what the heck did I care about that for? It just doesn't matter. And the sooner you can learn that and appreciate the juiciness of that orange and how great it smells, you're going to be off to the races.
I couldn't agree more. Honestly, it's something I struggled with a lot when I was younger. Of just like, next goalpost, next goalpost, next goalpost. Eventually they just stopped. I just stopped even recognizing that there was one. I would just blow past things and got to a point and I was like, I'm really unhappy. Because I found like my old goals that I wanted to write out. And I was like, I smashed these and I'm unhappy. What is happening right now? And then I read, do you know who Russ is? He's a rap artist.
Yeah.
But I love his book. I keep it on my desk at all times. I'll send you a copy.
Oh yeah, that'd be cool. Yeah.
I love this book, but he talked about one little point about how he doesn't play for the points now. He just plays to play the game. He's referencing basketball, and I think that's really what it takes. Is you just play for the sake of playing and enjoying the game. Who cares what the points are?
Okay, who's the Nigerian player that's Greek? He's got a name.
Giannis. Yeah. He Giannis. Just made that.
So have you seen that interview where he says some
like yesterday, right?
It's about failure, and he goes, "Okay, we won a championship." He goes, "So we've been playing for 20. This team's been in existence for 50 years. I mean, it's been 50-year failure."
Yeah.
He goes, "No, we're out there, we're trying, we're entertaining people, whatever. Why? Like, if you don't win, it's a fail."
Yeah.
And that was brilliant what he had to say.
I think here's a tough part about all of this. I never realized up until recently how large the gap is between knowing and doing. You think you read a book and that information is just downloaded into your brain. But no, it takes years and years of like knowing better, but not doing better to eventually start doing better. It takes forever.
Just like stop beating yourself up and try. And you know what? There's a lot of help out there. There's a lot of groups out there. Don't be afraid to reach out and ask for help or have that conversation, because that will save your life.
I think that's why, like, honestly, having a conversation with you talking at the DentNet event, I hate to say this in a weird way. I hope you don't take this wrong. People need to hear it from someone like you, meaning you've probably checked off 90% of people's boxes in their head of, okay, you get your specialty, you do well, you run a practice, you give back, you're well known in the community, financially you're stable, you're good. It's like they almost need to hear it from you of, oh, I've checked off all the boxes, just to let you know they don't matter. There are no boxes, you just made them up.
It's like, well, I'm going to worry about what they think. Who are they? Where are they? Are they in like, they company? Where is this building full of they?
Yeah.
Like it drives me nuts, and we're all guilty of it. But anyways, I appreciate once again your time and you listening, and I hope you can compress this into some sense.
No,
And
we'll definitely.
I hope we can continue the conversation.
And there you have it, episode 3 of the Dental Journeys podcast with Dr. Bruce Freeman. If you'd like to connect with Dr. Freeman, we'll include his social media links in the show notes of today's podcast episode. Thank you for listening to another episode of the Dental Journeys podcast, proudly sponsored by White Coat Financial. Join us next time as we continue to explore the journeys, strategies, and successes of dental professionals across Canada.